You're okay, Bill.
Do I need earplugs or something?
Okay.
Turn your volume up.
This is Chairman Miller. I would like to start the September 8th meeting of the Planning Commission. First on the agenda, we have a call to order. So I guess we find out who's here.
Yep, we're going to call roll.
Okay.
Carmen's going to call roll. All right, Commissioner Aguirre. Commissioner
I'm here.
Berg. Commissioner
Oh,
Davis.
Here.
Commissioner
Berg,
Hood.
here.
Commissioner Marinu.
Here.
Chairman Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Wortman.
Here. Okay, with that underway, let's get to the adoption of the minutes of the last meeting.
I move that we adopt the minutes as written. Jim Berg.
Second the motion.
Okay, minutes have been, motions for the minutes in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 So unanimous, the minutes have been approved. Okay, next on the agenda is a public hearing. Item A, can you tell us about that, Debbie?
Yeah, first I'll read the hearing disclosure statement. The review criteria for a amendment is found in Coos Bay Municipal Code, Chapter 17.360, which was included in the staff report and notice. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person believes is applicable to the decision. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient detail to afford the decision makers and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal on the issue. The applicant and owner of the property at 2550 Woodland Drive is requesting a comprehensive plan map amendment and a zone designation amendment to rezone the property from medical park to low-density residential. Prior to the medical park
I need your help.
designation, the property was residential. It was originally developed as a residential structure. For many years, it was a doctor's office. Then it became multiple medical use suites. But in the last couple years, finding tenants to occupy the entire or a portion of the structure is becoming more difficult. And with all the new regulations around COVID, their previously approved multiple residential medically related uses that was approved earlier in the year has become financially and maintenance-wise not feasible. So the applicant is requesting to rezone to the low-density residential. And there is an abutting low-density residential in the area, or abutting the property, I should say. We applied the required decision criterion for the rezone. I would be glad to read the details of the staff report if anyone wishes. Otherwise, it was included in the staff report that was posted 7 days prior to the hearing. Up on the screen, you can see the existing and the proposed comp plan designation and the existing and the proposed zone designation for the subject property. There are, I believe, 3 review criteria that had to be addressed for the amendment to be for a recommendation of approval on the amendment. Like I said, I'd be glad to read those details if anyone wishes.
I would wish to have those read, Debbie.
Okay. The number A, approval criterion is that the proposed amendment is consistent with the applicable policies of the comprehensive plan, or that a significant change in circumstances requires an amendment to the map or plan. There wasn't a significant change as far as the property itself goes, and there is a change in the need in the area for a medical park, and that is what the applicant was basing their request on. Also on recent reports that have been done showing a shortage in housing for our area, and that was decision criterion A. B is the proposed amendment is in the best interest of the public. Based on the housing needs analysis and the need expressed in multiple applications from Bay Area Hospital saying they need more housing for visiting doctors and nurses, as well as their regular staff. Finding housing close to the hospital is better for retaining employees. And they've commented on over the last couple years, requests for this sort of thing, indicating their employees are having an issue with finding housing in the area. And then C, that approval of the amendment will not result in a decrease in the level of service for capital facilities or services identified in the Coos Bay Capital Improvement Plan. And our operations administrator indicated that they completed a capital paving plan, PCI index in 2015, which rated the condition of all the streets in Coos Bay. And he said that there would not be a change in a decrease to the service if the subject property were to change from medical park to residential. And the site is fully developed with existing utilities, so there would be no change to services as well.
Okay, very well. I forgot to ask, is there any conflict of interest with the commissioners?
Nope,
No.
nothing.
Okay, do we have someone here to speak, proponent of this change?
Is the applicant or his representative on the line? The applicant had intended to participate, either themselves or their representative, so I'm not sure. Can you see who else on the line? Maybe they're muted or something. James, are you on the line?
Oh, yeah, Johnson here, yes, he is. I see him, he may be muted.
James, is your microphone muted?
It appears to me that the microphone's muted. This is Carolyn, from what I'm seeing here.
Well, I corresponded with the applicant earlier today, and he didn't have any questions or concerns about the staff report, so I'm not sure if he has anything else he wants to add, but he had no questions earlier today regarding what staff proposed.
Okay, with that being said, do we have any opposition to this change? Is there anyone, neighbors or anyone that's...
And just for the record, staff received no comments either for or against the proposal.
Okay. Well, I think we will close the hearing then and deliberate. So, anybody have any thoughts? I guess my first thought is how would this differ from if this was a commercial zone and somebody was unable to rent out their building and they want to change it to residential. How does that differ from what this is, from medical park to residential? There's been a big effort to try to create that whole medical park over there in the beginning. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, this is Jim Berg. They've got acres and acres of medical park around the hospital. These little houses, buildings they're just little houses. I mean, it's the ones I've been in them and out of them during my process here. You know, there's not going to take much to turn them into a regular little dwelling, I guess. I don't see them as being a huge detractor from the current medical practices in the area. I think there's plenty of space. Probably most practitioners would want something a little more contemporary.
One of the differences, Rex, also is in a commercial zone, residential is permitted above the first floor or 30% of the ground floor, as long as 70% of the ground floor is used for commercial. And we probably wouldn't seriously consider a rezone from commercial to low-density residential or any residential unless it was a budding residential zones. Also for commercial property, medium density is a permitted use, so apartment buildings would be a permitted use in a commercial zone.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Wortman, and I had two comments. I agree with Debbie. I guess the first thing I look at in a rezone is surrounding environment, and there is adjacent property that has the same zoning designation, or at least a residential zoning designation. And the second is it's consistent with a prior use, so it's not like we're going to a completely different category. So my gut would tell me it's consistent. I don't personally have the knowledge of the medical park and how it was formed. I don't know what the land inventories are. I didn't review that. But if staff don't have any concerns that inventories would be affected in a negative way as far as conflict, of use or anything like that, I think it's pretty straightforward.
This is Commissioner Geary. I actually agree with Ryan too. I think this would benefit the property and open up a little bit more of the, we've got a rental problem where there's not enough rentals for people. This would open up their clientele and get somebody in there because it's been sitting vacant. That space has been vacant for some time.
This is Jeff. The property owners at that location have historically had a difficult time with the medical practitioners being interested in those buildings. And they certainly have a residential character and feel to them. So going back to a residential use is probably a good idea in this particular case. And Jim emphasized the interest of a current practitioner having an interest in a more contemporary, modern-looking office building. So I'm in support of this.
Well, Bill, you got anything to think about, say on this? No, apparently not. Well, okay, if we've thrashed it over, I guess we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the comprehensive plan and rezone application as presented. Recommend to City Council, I'm sorry.
Second.
I'll second that.
I'll second it.
Okay, a couple seconds.
3
there.
seconds.
Okay, well,
Second,
we've got a
third,
motion and a
fourth.
second.
We're going to do a roll call vote.
Sure, let's do a roll call vote. Carmen?
Commissioner Berg,
Yay.
Yay.
Commissioner Mario,
Aye.
Commissioner Berry? I don't think you've gotten them.
Yeah.
oh, Commissioner Geary,
Aye.
Commissioner Wortman,
Aye.
Chairman Miller,
Aye. Well, here it's.
Alrighty, with this recommendation for approval, it will go before the city council on October 6th at 7 PM at this location. Written notice will be sent again to the notice area of the city council review and hearing. That's all.
Okay. Let's move on to our next item, item B. And I'm going to need some clarification on this. Carolyn, would you tell us what this is all about?
Well, let me
Yes, I
first
can.
do the
Could
public hearing
Debbie
disclosure.
read the disclosure statement first, please?
The review criteria for a ordinance amendment is found at Coos Bay Municipal Code, Chapter 17.360, which was included in the staff report and notice. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria and other criteria in the plan and land use regulation which the person believes is applicable to the decision. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient detail to afford the decision makers and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal on that issue.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you. The work in front of you is going to be related to multiple amendments to the development code. You might recall that you started this last March. You walked through a couple of amendments, but there were quite a few left to go. Could you move on to the next slide, please? The amendments were initiated by the city because there was a need to feel like we could speed things up a little bit and make things less costly for applicants. This slide really walks through 5 different reasons why we're doing this. We want to facilitate efficiency of review for applicants. We want to reduce development costs. We want to clarify some terms and standards. By doing that, we would be expanding opportunities for future development and ultimately streamline development proposal time. So the adage that time is money is definitely true in this case if you ask anyone in the development community. So the council would like to accommodate that where they can. Next slide, please. This is a list of all the amendments. There's quite a few. I'm not going to go through them all right this second, but within the next hour or so that you're connecting today and potentially in the future, we will get through all of these so you can make recommendations to council. Next slide, please. I think I noted earlier that in March, you reviewed some of these, some amendments, the accessory dwelling units and some standards for fencing in the urban renewal area. And that was prompted by a directive from the council back in February. They wanted to have you look at all these amendments, but in March, you got through these 2. When May rolled around, the council went ahead and approved the 2 amendments and by the adoption of Ordinance 524. So those amendments are now a part of our municipal code. Next slide, please. A lot of amendments, so where are we going to go from here? It's unlikely that you will get these all of these in one meeting, although stranger things have happened. Last time you looked at this, there was one piece of the amendment sections that seemed to cause some real, cause a dilemma in reaching a consensus as a group. So that was related to site plan review. And many of the amendments in here, besides just that one section, the requirement for site plan review is sprinkled throughout the code. So what I'd like to do is suggest that you take whatever time you need, look at this in kind of a workshop style, and then you can evaluate how far you want to get this evening. I have 4 recommendations here. Next slide, please. The first one is to dedicate the first part of your discussion to 4 different chapters. 1, the definitions, the Waterfront Heritage District, the supplemental standards, and the planned unit development section. These sections do not have reference to site plan review, so it seemed like this would be a good place to start. What I'd like to ask you to do, and I conferred with your chair before this meeting, is that you accept a report from me, you take comments from the public, we then discuss it, and then you develop a motion for action. After that, then, there's 3 other recommendations in the following 3 pages. You can go through those quickly if you would. Sheila, to take us to page 10. It says September 8th meeting at the top. So if the commission is okay with that approach, what I'd like to do is ask you to walk through these sections first that don't have reference to site plan review. Does that work for you? Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's start out with the definitions section. Next slide, please. Actually, no, that's not the right slide. Keep going. Let's go to the definition slide. Could you go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please.
She's working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the correct slide, Carolyn?
Definitions, yes, please. Go back one, please. Okay, thank you. This particular section, there's 2 pages that you received as part of the attachments. And if you want to look at those while we discuss, that would be fine. I'm going to walk you through them a little bit. On page 1 of this chapter, there are a couple of definitions related to access. These were kind of holdovers from the transportation system plan. We had thought that we would have gotten through this before the TSP was approved. And so we made a commitment to take these to the commission separately because we thought we were going to all be finished. But they weren't, so we're needing to include these in their definitions now, so we'll be consistent with our TSP. The accessory building structure definition, we gave some examples of what those could be on that first page. Also on page 1, we identified density, low density, and medium density. When staff is reviewing projects, we often have to sit down, pull out our calculator so we can identify what the density is going to be. And that can get a little cumbersome, and it's a little unfair to the applicant because they can't figure it out on their own unless they dig deep into our regulations. So we believe that it would help to include these definitions in how to reach the conclusion on density in the definitions section. On page 2 of this section, there's 2 more definitions: park and ride and pathway. And again, these are related to the TSP update work. So it's important that those are retained. The very last definition, rideshare, is also something that we need to adopt for consistency with the TSP. The last definition that I want to reference is there's regulations in Chapter 17.362 on planned unit development, and we felt like because those changes are happening in that section, we wanted to provide consistency in this section as well. We'll talk about the planned unit development more later, but just a hint, we've suggested setting up a system whereby it could be applied not only to subdivisions, but for development projects. And we can talk more about that later. So that is the definition section. Are there any questions on that?
So it's just the 3, the access easement, the density, and the planned unit development?
That's pretty much it, yeah. And all the definitions that have to do with traffic and parking, pathways, access ways, easements, yes. Ride share.
And we're adding those to the existing definitions, or?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Right. Should I go on to the second of the four group in this section?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. The next, if you could go to the next slide, is the Waterfront Heritage District. We have added in that section, it's on page 1 of 1 in the attachment that we had in your report, some language that would have allowed reader boards along Highway 101. This was something that the council was petitioned for by one of the property owners down there, and they concurred that the Planning Commission should consider this. The design assistance team would continue to provide recommendations to staff on what these signs would look like, but it would open up an opportunity for folks to be able to use this. The change would be in number X, basically saying the reader boards are prohibited except for this particular area abutting North Bayshore Drive if they're placed within 10 feet of the west property line. So we'd like you to take a look at that.
I have a thought on that. We make a big deal about backlit signs and worry about exactly how that sign's going to look and how that's going to evoke the periods we like. And yet reader boards, to me, defy all of that when we're talking about doing it.
Well, the council would like your thoughts on this as a group.
Okay, so define the area that you're talking about once again, please.
It would be, they would be allowed along North Bayshore Drive along Highway 101 in the Waterfront Heritage District. So in the Heritage District on Front Street, they would not be allowed, but they would be allowed just along Highway 101.
This proposed amendment is just slightly expanding what we approved a couple years ago that allowed electronic signs along North Bay Shore. This just adds reader boards to that.
Well, they're everywhere. And so I don't know. It's the city of Coos Bay, the city just put up a massive reader board in 2 locations downtown Coos Bay. We're a block away from that heritage district. So it seems kind of silly to prohibit these reader boards if we're allowing electronic signage along that stretch. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't know how many of these were in use in the 1920s that we are trying to evoke here sometimes, but it's just a thought I had. It doesn't seem to add to that romance that we're trying to create in some of these districts.
This is Commissioner Wortman. Carolyn, where does ODOT come into all of this? I'm assuming, if they're along 101, that they're going to be notified as part of a review process. Where would they fall with their insight or comment?
We'll find that out before we take this to council. Right now, they've not expressed any displeasure at the ones that we already have. As you know, the one in front of the visitor center is very large, and it's going both ways. So there's 2 of them the city has put up. So that being said, and after talking with our operations manager, it didn't appear to me that we would get much feedback from them on this, but they've not been sent this yet.
Well, I guess my initial take on it is I think it would be consistent with things like the recent additions downtown. And secondly, I would say in the recent past, it seems to be a trend towards the desire for reader boards. I don't know that that's the criteria or a decision-making point, but in the last year or so at North Bend, I did have quite a few inquiries about reader boards in that community.
One thing that would also still remain is that they would be prohibited from advertising other businesses, and that's where ODOT has the biggest concern is off-premise signage.
Sure.
And this will retain the same restriction that there's no off-premise signage allowed.
Sure.
Okay, so the boundaries again, starting roughly at the Chevron station, right? Or possibly Pacific, the real estate office there. And going north all the way to the new development? Is that the zone?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
From the highway, from 101 to the bay.
Okay, adjacent to the highway only,
Yes.
and not on Front Street.
Not on Front Street. They would still be prohibited there.
So, in contrary to Jim Berg's thoughts about this old school look down there along Highway 101, I think reader boards, if we allow electronic signage, should be allowed there. However, if we can limit and keep those reader boards off of Front Street and hopefully attract the type of buildings and tenants into that area that we have wished for since 1995, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Well, we're making the distinction then, if I'm just to be clear here, naturally I wouldn't want to be the contrarian here. So the distinction is that on Front Street itself, which we're trying to create something, or well, some people are working very hard there to do that, that would be an area where we wouldn't have these delightful modern devices, but just a bit further down on 101, in front of Coos Bay Village, which admittedly doesn't necessarily evoke the period of significance either, even though it's very attractive, I think. and that's where they would be permitted. So I'm fine with that.
Any other comments?
I know you guys were concerned that I was going to buy off on this. I think that'll be.
Okay. If there's no other comments, I'm going to go on to the next slide, please. This section is related to supplemental development standards. And on page 1, we've identified a distinction between residential and commercial fences. You do not see the section about commercial fences here because I've only changed things that we are modifying, and this would be one of them. The second piece is related to lighting, 335040. And our operations manager asked us to consider adding this language about lighting on a property so that we're getting away from glare and also from just the lack of lighting. He'd really like to see this required for safety purposes, and we really thought it was this was a good place to put it. On page, a lot of this is related to site plan review. If you would jump to page 3 and page 4, you'll see section 17.335090, zero lot line development. And this is literally a repeat out of chapter 17340. We just felt it was better placed at this location. So there really isn't anything new in here. It's just been relocated. I think, one more, and this was the 17.335080, where it talks about indoor related businesses. There was a reference here to only the industrial commercial zone, and that reference should be taken out. That was a leftover from when we originally did this, so it's kind of a cleanup. The other thing that's added is the 1,000-foot distance from a school. That was not in our original language, but it is now in state law, so we have added it here. That's what I have for this section. Are there questions?
Well, they seem to be logical additions to me.
Okay.
I would agree with Commissioner Miller. I mean, for the most part, it seems like they're either, things that staff have worked through on a logistical level. The TSP updates are obvious. I mean, state law updates, I don't see anything concerning.
Okay. Any other comments? Next slide, please. This fourth chapter is the planned unit development section. And I alluded to this earlier. Debbie and I, over the course of the last couple of years, as we've seen new applications come in that don't quite fit the development standards, but are really good projects, it seemed like there's a mechanism to create a deviation from some standards if you're doing a subdivision, but there wasn't one just for a regular project. So what's in here is a little bit of a hybrid to enable to come up with some innovative design, open space, and building placement that may be a little out of the norm in that it doesn't quite meet the standard, but maybe it's 10–15% different. So what we did was we came up with kind of a morph into two types of planned unit developments, and you can see them both on page 1 of 4. Essentially, the intent is noted in each section, but the regular land use PUD statement, the general statement, was just this number 1 originally because it was for land division only. And we've added number 2 to be for development projects. And then what we did throughout the entirety of this chapter is created almost like a second category, 1 for subdivisions, 1 for development projects. A person would need to go through the same process they go through now with a type 1, 2, or 3 process, but they would be able to look to some deviation of standards if they could come up with an interesting project. Those are outlined further in 17362030 on page 2. It talks about in number 2 that the evaluation of the PUD against the requirements of the code with the potential to adjust up to and including 15% of a numerical standard like a building height, landscaping, lot coverage, lot dimensions, or lot area. So if you went over one of those standards, but the planning commission or could identify that you had some outstanding design, and we need to work on the findings piece of this. We thought that it would be a good idea. The only caveat is that you would have to make sure that the limits of the uniform building code, actually I think that's called International Building Code now, right, Ryan? Yeah, International Building Code. You have to make sure that those were retained. The balance of this is really just cleanup, except for one thing, and that is 17362040. The current code identifies a minimum area for a PUD, and that again, today is only for subdivisions, but that PUD minimum area is 2 acres. And I'm thinking back to the number of times Debbie and I have sat down when a new application comes in and it's, 1 acre, 3/4 of an acre, and it's like, this would be a great candidate for a PUD, but A, it's not a subdivision, and B, it's not 2 acres. So we felt that this was something for the commission to look at. We think that this would enable you to see some new designs that folks normally wouldn't go after because they didn't want to have to go through a big variance process. And we think that it'd be a good way to go. So we'd really like to get your thoughts on this. This is a little bit out of the box for Coos Bay, but we'd like to get your insight.
I'm 100% in favor of it. 1,000% in favor of it. We think about the number of PUDs that Coos Bay has had in the past, and anything that might facilitate making it easier, smaller is better in Coos Bay many times. So Jeff approves of that idea.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Wortman, and I wanted to just say, I agree with Commissioner Marinu. I think it fits the intent of a planned unit development. Just because there's no minimum doesn't mean that it wouldn't necessarily be approved or that certain components would still have to be addressed. So it's not like it's a golden ticket to any half-acre PUD will be approved. I mean, it's just providing flexibility. So I think that can be observed reasonably.
And we need that flexibility.
Okay. Others? Any other comments? Well, if not, what I would ask you to do then is have any further discussion you want to have on this, and then reach a consensus and make a motion for your the action you want to recommend to the council on these 4 chapters.
Well, okay, Carolyn, I think we're ready to entertain a motion.
Would you like me to frame the motion?
That would be helpful.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
So we have.
Well, a motion could be that you are recommending council approval of amendments to 17.150.020 definitions, 17.240 waterfront heritage district, 17.335 supplemental standards, and 17.362 planning and development, all of which are found in the September 8th, 2020 Planning Commission packet.
So, is that the form of the motion?
A so moved from any of you would do the trick.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Jeff.
So moved by Jeff and seconded by Jim.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Carmen, you're gonna have a roll call?
Commissioner Aguirre,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Mario,
Aye.
Commissioner Wortman,
Aye.
Chairman Miller,
Aye.
Sounds like the motion carries. Thank you.
Carolyn, when is the scheduled city council hearing on this item?
That's to be determined. We'll notice it as required in our code, and we will, we can let the commission know.
Thank you.
The next recommendation, it was recommendation 2 in the staff report. If you could go to the next slide, please. Procedures. There you go. That's the slide we want. We were recommending that you accept a report from us on this, and go through it, and have some discussion, reach a consensus, and we are recommending that that you propose the council adopt these amendments. Really, more than any other amendment you're looking at tonight, this is kind of the golden ticket to achieve the things that I mentioned early on in the meeting: efficiency, saving time and money for the applicant, and providing something that'll still get us through compliance with standards with a lot less effort and work. So that being said, chapter 17.365 is not a chapter that I gave you in the packet. But can you go back, please? Last slide. There's a lot of chapter changes, so I gave you a clean copy of this and a track change copy. But for now, I'm going to just start to walk through them and take you through each one. The site plan review process that you see in chapter 17.365, it parallels the processes and requirements for other land use type. But in some cases, it's an extra layer. I'd say, Debbie, would you agree, maybe 40–50% of the time, it's an extra layer that if you included it within your current requirements for conditional use permits, type 2, type 3 permits, you could save quite a bit of time. It would basically allow staff to authorize more projects without having to go to the Planning Commission.
Correct.
You go on to the next page. The point of moving a lot of that work into the procedure section is to assure continuation of that process, to make sure that we have good design review standards, for building placement, architectural design, things like that. As I noted before, we believe this will create an increase in efficiency for a comprehensive review of projects by staff when we review our projects, and we believe it'll be less costly. Right now, applicants are paying an extra $840 for a site plan review. So it could save some money for folks as they move through the process. Next page, please. This slide goes over pages 1 through 3 of the attachment that I gave to you. On the first page, this purpose section, chapter 17.131 procedures has some nice words about the purpose of the procedures. But what I did was I took a lot of the purpose section out of site plan review and added it to this. Kind of to set the tone that we are building that site plan review into the procedures and taking it out of that extra step. Page 1, this numbers 5 through 7, these would be new pieces that would be added to the applicability section that talk about basically some findings and exclusions that we had taken out of site plan review section. Page 2 walks you through the pre-application review, some cleanup there and some revisions. Page 3 is where we really begin to get into the meat on the bones here of what's going to create the efficiencies. Pages 3 through, I would say, 3 through 5 really begins to break this down. Could we go to the next slide? On page 3, it walks you through what would be required for a type 1 permit. Projects that would be less than 10 units, modifying the interior of an existing structure, installing or replacing underground utilities, painting, minor repair, and any other development the director determines doesn't result in any appreciable increase in land use activity. Some of these things are identified as totally exempt from site plan review, but in the site plan review section, but they are, many of them required in the other section of the code, other sections of the code, which is why they're included here. The next page talks about type 2 permits. And this is where it begins to get interesting. Right now, the Planning Commission reviews all of these things in the type 2 process as part of a site plan review. What we're suggesting is that authority be assigned to, as a type 3. These are things you usually see. What we're suggesting is that site plan review work be taken on by staff instead. We would still identify issues related to all this stuff. We would still notify people within, throwing distance of the property. People could appeal the decision of staff to the Planning Commission, but we believe that changing this up to allow staff to review these things as part of a type 2 permit would create some real efficiencies. What happens then is you move into the type 3, and we're suggesting that these larger projects that are going to have to go through Planning Commission include the site plan review process per se. We would just incorporate them here. So if we were to get a building an application for development of 4,001 data, we had a project with 21 or more parking spaces, you would see it. Anything more than 10 units, you would see it. A subdivision, you would see it. You see a lot of these things anyway. So it's our thought that this would be a good way to kind of break out some pieces and parts of this that could be handled more at a staff level and save folks time. That's really the meat of these changes. There are a few other things, like what we want to see as part of a completeness review. Those are on pages 5 and 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. All of this was moved from the site plan review section. So all of the scrutiny that a project would undergo would still happen. It just wouldn't be under a whole separate new permit. I think that kind of hits the high points. Debbie, is there anything else that we talked about? There is one thing I would like to bring up. On page 13 of this package, we've added a new section. Right now it's called modifications to permits, but what we want to do is add a section that talks about minor modifications versus major modifications. So if someone comes in and say, for instance, they've gotten an approval for a type 2 permit, or even for a type 2 permit, and they want to do something slightly different. They want to add another 5% square feet, or they want to relocate a door, or they want to do something like that. They're not going to have to walk through the process again. That's something that could be authorized as a type 1 procedure. If something is bigger than that, we would be looking at the authorizing authority, whether it had been staff or the planning commission, taking a look. So if somebody came in and suddenly wanted a 40% increase in square footage, but I was going to push them over into the 4,000 plus square feet that would require type 3, we would send it to the planning commission. If it was under, we could go through that review process with them. The nice thing about these modifications, especially the larger ones, and having a modification process, is that Joe Neighbor knows what's going on. And that same neighbor might have commented a year and a half prior on a project, and this would afford a way for them to be notified. We're looking at a change to this, and would you like to weigh in? There's a process you can go through for that. So other than that, we're just referring back throughout the code to other relevant sections for noticing, things like that. And we'd really like to get your feedback on this and see what you think.
Anything that you can do to expedite the processes that people go through with regard to development is beneficial. And it's incredibly expensive to get stuff done today. And time is a big part of that. So if staff can handle a lot of these things without going into the planning commission environment, which takes 30, 60, 90 days to get through, I'm in favor of it. Now, you've limited some of that with your criteria, 4,000 feet, 21 parking spaces, et cetera, through into a type 3 permit. You guys know when to put a halt to some of these applications, and you know where your efficiencies are with the applications coming through the door. And if you can speed that process up, I'm in favor of it. The planning commission doesn't need to see all of this stuff.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Wortman. I just wanted to say, first of all, Carolyn, thank you for all of these updates. It's really refreshing to see this a little bit more streamlined and efficient for both parties involved. And my other question for you is, this is pretty similar to what a lot of planning divisions around the country are doing, or at least regionally, correct, to try and streamline some of these approaches where
Yes.
appropriate. I would say it's pretty common these days to see this type of update.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And I guess I really like it just because I think it still respects, allowing for citizen involvement. It doesn't really dissuade people to be involved throughout the process. However, it just keeps things, a little more progressive and expedited, but still allowing safeguards, like the type 3 review, or if you, deem it appropriate or something changes beyond that, minor and major modification. There's a lot of safeguards in place there still to allow for further review if necessary.
Okay. Amy, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think streamlining the process should help get things going. I think development needs to happen, and if we can save some time and save some money, I think that'll be very beneficial.
Okay. Are there other comments? Debbie, do you want to add anything?
No.
Okay.
Well, then I think if we reach a consensus, we should recommend to the council we adopt these proposed amendments.
That sounds like a motion.
Yep.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Yes. Second,
Ron.
on top of, maybe we pair this second.
Okay, Carmen.
All right, Commissioner Geary,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
I think that was for me. Aye.
Commissioner Maru,
Aye.
Commissioner Wortman,
Aye.
Chairman Miller,
Aye.
Sounds like that motion carries.
Okay, the motion carries. All right, Carolyn, we're gonna try recommendation 3 here, or what's
Yes,
everybody's
sir.
thought on that?
If you're game to continue, I am game to present. This third recommendation is to accept a report on the balance of the amendments. And what I'll do is I'll just go through them one by one. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more chapters. But honestly, most of these are very short. The first is the low density residential land use table. And on page 1, you're going to see a few revisions to that. We wanted to incorporate certified factory built homes as a part of this allowed use in this area. We also took out references to site plan review in the areas that they were identified in this particular chapter. And that's it for that chapter. The second one is related to medium density residential. And in this particular section, we identified a density that is different than what's in the code now, going from 8 units per net acre to 16 units per acre. We're proposing that you bump that up to 12 dwelling units per acre. And the reason that we do is because when there was a really big amendment, almost a whole rewrite of the code a few years ago, it became apparent in going through it that it did not really take into consideration the maximum density that could be used in this area, which is or in the city, which would be 25 dwelling units per acre. Not wanting to tinker with that too much because you are going to have some code changes next year related to some housing work the state is doing. It seemed appropriate to bump that up from 8 to 12 in this medium density residential area. The opportunities for housing here are slim, and to afford folks the chance to develop more, we felt like this could be justified based on what you have in your comp plan. The section on development diversity, this came from another part of this code. It's basically a repeat. And then you move into the tables, and that identifies the different permit types that would be used. Now, please be mindful that it's written this way because in some cases, we've now gotten rid of the site plan review discussion. So that's important. We also added the addition of fourplexes with multifamily homes. We've also added on page 3 of 5 other references to the type of permit that you would need to have. One thing that we missed when we did our vacation rental ordinance, a year and a half ago, I think, was we didn't include it in the medium density residential area, and we want to add that. As you recall, I think at your last meeting, didn't you review one of these because it was in the medium density area? With this change, you're not going to have to do that. Well, that'll go through a type 2 permit, just like it does in the low density area. There is just a variety of other things here. One thing that we changed was this religious assembly, identifying the type, permit type. I don't think there's people banging on our doors to set up religious assemblies, but in the event that a mega church wants to come here at some point, it'd be a good idea for the commission to look at it and do a type 3. So that's where this came from. The other thing that we've added that I think is really going to be helpful is that, and we don't have it now, is a category that's called other similar uses deemed by the director to be compatible with this district. So in other words, if the director sees something that's similar to, a land use that's identified here, let's say, I don't know, you could pick one, like an educational services. Well, what if somebody wants to do a preschool? And what if just by chance we don't identify preschools in our definition section? I think we probably do, but the director could make that call. Oh, okay, I think this is close enough, this will work, we're going to go through this process. It lists a type 2, but the director has the authority anyway to say, hey, I think we need to go with a type 3. Maybe it's something really, who knows, none of us have ever thought it before, but it's just odd enough that he or she would feel more comfortable having the commission look at. The density tables have been revised to reflect what I just mentioned. The balance of this in the medium density area also talks about, it relocates some pieces, and then it also references on the last page a density for the factory built home parks, taking them from 12 to 16 units rather than the 8, not more than 8 dwelling units per net acre. So we have on the medium density menu. Are there comments?
So you said it's eight units per acre to 16 units per acre, and so this is kind of mid-ground at 12?
Yes, it would take it up from 8 to 12.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Should I go on to the commercial discussion?
Sure.
Please.
Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. This particular chapter, pretty hefty. There's 10 pages here, but much of it is kind of cleanup. There's information on the first page related to the TSP update. There's sections, pages 3 through 10, that go through and mirror what was in the procedures section for the type 1, type 2, and type 3 review. So that when you're reading through this, these uses, you'll be able to refer back to those procedures. They are the same as what you see in the procedures section that you looked at earlier. These reflect also the medium density residential that we talked about. The other thing that we added here that I thought was kind of fun on page 4 of 10 is the addition under restaurants and drinking establishments. And that could include espresso carts, food stands, something that might be on your property, but outside your business itself. So if you wanted to set something up in your parking lot on your private property, that's something that you could do because the definition doesn't quite include all of these things. So we wanted to add those. The other thing that we did on mostly on page 6, and this, I thought this was very interesting. About 2 years ago, some folks from the Confederated Tribes approached the city and said, hey, we want to do kind of an arts and culture component to what's happening in Empire. How could we do that? And what do you think? And so they kind of went down the path of, they got a grant and they're doing something. But it made us think about the types of uses in arts districts that we could wrap into our development code. And if you look on page 6 of 10, you're going to see some of those. Bookstores, beauty shops, art galleries, art studios, flower stands, nurseries, things like that you could do, as a part of your business or in an outdoor setting. One thing, interestingly enough, was exercise studios. Those are pretty campy in a lot of your art districts. So we wrapped those into that. We also clarified sections of the marijuana sales that you would have to comply with under the marijuana retail sales, subject to the requirement somewhere else in the code. It looks like I got a typo here. We also, on page 7, wrapped in a discussion of tourist habitation. That would be a permitted use in this area, but we exempted campgrounds as a conditional use, and that's referenced right below. Let's see. The next few pages, if you look on page 9 of 10, we added under use outdoor events related to grand openings and similar special business events. So we don't want to be left scratching our head if somebody's doing a grand opening and they want to have some radio station record out front, and we don't want to have that be something that you can't do. We'd like to have a little process in place to make that happen. And then the last piece of this on page 10 of 10 is adding again some director discretion under other uses for things that kind of are different or out of the box. These last 2 items are very much the same. We need to kind of play with that a little bit, but I think we can do that between now and the time this would go to council to have that not be quite so wordy. So that's the piece on commercial uses. Are there any questions?
Could you tell us about industrial commercial?
I would be happy to do that. If you could go to the next slide, please. This industrial commercial section on pages 1 and 2, it's pretty much a repeat of what you saw in the commercial section. Quite a few things that are also in the commercial section on pages 2 and 3. We also added a section on landscaping on page 4 of 6. And this is a little nod to
Just kidding, Rex.
no, this is a little nod to pedestrian plazas and how you can include pedestrian plazas in some of your landscaping. So I know in particular there will probably be some comments about that I'd really like to hear. But there's also on page 5 a requirement that there be a landscaping and design plan approved for projects. That we felt that was important.
Good.
And the last pieces on page 5 and on page 6 are related to requirements related to the TSP. So on those, I'm hopeful there's not much discussion about transit stops and light illumination for pedestrians. Those are things that we had included in the TSP discussion.
So Carolyn, could you give me an example of an industrial commercial site in Coos Bay or North Bend that this might apply to?
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking about.
Let's keep this to Coos Bay, please.
We'll keep it to Coos Bay. Debbie, give me a site you can think of. I'm thinking of one, but I don't think it's industrial commercial.
For industrial commercial?
Yeah. Oh, isn't there a piece down by the water as you're leaving town? You're kind of going around that bend by the Chevron station. That property off to the west. Right. There's a piece of property there, a vacant piece of property there. I think that's zoned industrial. Debbie, am I right?
I see, correct. That is. Yep.
So let's say somebody wanted to develop that property and let's say they came up with the idea of having a walkway along the front of the back side of the property along the water. But if they put that in, they were going to be short on their landscaping. Would there be an interest in counting that as part of their landscaping? This lays kind of an outward number of what they could do. This says 650 square feet. Asphalt wouldn't be permitted. So that might be an example.
Okay. Good.
Should I go on?
Please.
Okay. Next slide, please. This is, I'd like to talk about the Hollering Place and the Watershed District. The Hollering Place District, there's a section that I've added back in here about maintenance that had been repealed at one point in time that I thought was important to add back. So we're looking at moving that. We had I had thought it was down below under number 7, but I bumped it up to number 5. And then number 7, the idea is to get rid of the site plan review, which we've already talked about. The work on a site plan review to be wrapped in the permitting from, that folks would need to get in this area. And that's referenced in many other parts of the Hollering Place District. And it also references excluding emergency access actions that are required to take place. So those are the minor changes there. Next slide. Oh, actually, no, you can stay there. The watershed district, we took out the site plan review requirement and replaced it with a type 2 review. And then the last slide is related to parking, lot line development, zero lot line development, and site plan review. What this would do on this page is if there was a non-conforming parking lot that had a conditional use permit, we'd have them go back to the planning commission to take a look at it. And it would have to be subject to our parking requirements in another portion of this section. And then the last 2 chapters, the zero lot line development, that would not be there anymore because it's been morphed into the supplemental standards. And the site plan review has been morphed into the purpose section of the code, chapter 17.130. So those chapters would essentially go away to be taken over someday by some other topic. The chapter numbers would stay, but the titles would be relocated. So, and that's all of it.
Carolyn, this is Commissioner Wortman. I have one question about the similar uses and being deemed appropriate by the planning director. Is there any type of formal process to initiate that, like an application form or fee or anything like that?
Well, typically those are type 1 reviews, right?
Okay.
Right, Debbie? A director decision is a type 1. That's
Okay.
usually how we handle it.
So it would just fall under that. There's no separate process that you envision
No.
or that I'm missing or anything like that.
Are there any other questions?
Well, on your items here, Carolyn, I think we went through a lot here tonight, but there seems, did we talk about the last one here, development standards? I guess we did the zero lot line, and the site plan review. This is everything on your list, item B.
In recommendation 3, yes, that's
Okay.
it.
Well, since there's no public here, I guess this is the public hearing. Is there any discussion from the commissioners before we reach a consensus on this? And recommend it to the city council? As with the others, it seems like they're all improvements, good ideas.
Possibly Carolyn can frame a motion again.
I would be happy to do that, sir. There could be a motion for Planning Commission recommendation to approve the September 8th, 2020 Planning Commission packet with changes to chapters 17.220 for low density residential, 17.225 medium density residential, 17.230 for commercial mixed use, 17.235 for industrial commercial, 17.250 Hollering Place, 17.270 Watershed District, 17.340 Zero Lot Line Development.
I'd like to make that motion.
So moved. And seconded by Jeff.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Carmen, what do you think?
All right, Commissioner Aguirre,
Aye.
Commissioner Berg,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Mano,
Aye.
Commissioner Wortman,
Aye.
Chairman Miller.
Aye.
Congratulations, commissioners. I think the folks that you serve are going to appreciate your recommendation to the council. I can let you know when they're going to meet, and there'll be a notice that goes out. And if any of you would like to participate in that hearing and share your thoughts, I'm sure they would appreciate that.
Thank you, Carolyn, for all your hard work on this. I know you've been working on it a while, and with COVID, it's been hard to get it through, and it really looks great.
Thank you.
Okay. Back to our agenda, item 5, public comments. Not seeing any public. Commissioner comments.
This is Commissioner Wortman, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, staff and other commissioners. It's been a pleasure serving the city of Coos Bay, and this will be my last meeting as I relocate out of the area.
Just a comment. Brian, it was a pleasure to have you on board as an experienced planner, and we wish you well going forward.
Thank you, Jeff.
And also, if you have an opportunity, please give me a call at my cell phone.
Okay.
When you have an opportunity.
I will do that.
I've not been able to say that.
Yeah.
The other comment that I had is, Carolyn, thank you, and Debbie, certainly, for your efforts of streamlining and reducing the burdens on development in the community. It's sometimes goes in the reverse, and all of this is beneficial for people who walk into your office, and I'm sure you see that, but a lot of people don't act on it, and you've acted on it, so I appreciate that. And I know that there's others, Mr. Berg here, similarly feels that way, so we appreciate the efforts.
I was just too shy to say it.
Thank you.
Okay, any staff comments?
Just a few. Ryan, you will be missed. Thank you for your service to the city, and it's been really a treat connecting with you professionally in your capacity here, and when we were connecting from planner to planner between our two cities. I just wish you all the best. I think you're going to do great things in the planning world. I wanted also to let you know that we'll notify you when we go onto the council with this. So if you want to participate, you can. And then I also wanted to let you know that at the October 13th meeting, you will be reviewing the Hollering Place Cultural Center land use permit application. So it's going to be important, very important, that we have a quorum for that meeting, because we are really up against a deadline to take action on that project. The time between they made their application and now we're running very short on the statutory requirements to finish timely. So if anyone cannot attend that meeting on October 13th, please let us know as soon as possible. Because if we don't have a quorum, we'll want to try to reschedule that meeting for some other date in October as a special meeting. So I appreciate your support on that. There's nothing like a deadline to light a fire under everybody, but it's not always very much fun. And then the last thing I want to report for me is that we are beginning a journey on some long-range planning that the city has, and the city council and the planning commission too, has dabbled in for a number of years. One of those things is called the Front Street Blueprint. I know many of you were involved in the action plan, and before that, the master plan along Front Street. And we were awarded funding by ODOT to drill down the action plan into 6 of the different focuses that plan weighed into: transportation, wayfinding, public art, 3 more that I can't remember off the top of my head because I'm a little brain dead. But the work on that is going to start probably in October. A second matter of importance, actually second and third, is that you may have recalled reading about House Bill 2001 and 2003 in the last legislative session. The state came up with a myriad of requirements that cities and counties are going to have to address to house folks in their communities, house folks of all income levels. And it's very interesting because the code that, as we've written it, as it's been written and as you've just updated it tonight, I think is going to go far to meet some of those requirements, but there's other things that we have to do. So we were awarded funding for 2 very large efforts. One effort is to do an update of our development code and our comprehensive plan related to housing and the requirements of that bill. The second effort was funding to identify very strategic ways to provide more housing. There's many state and state programs and private development options that the city can explore. And we now have a consultant on board that was hired by DLCD to help us do that. We also have a consultant to do the comp plan work. That will be managed by myself, and Sheila will be helping out with the administrative support. So this coming 7 to 12 months is going to be pretty busy. We're really looking forward to ultimately bringing some of these things to you to look at. But in the meantime, you're going to have plenty to do. So thank you very much. Debbie, did you have anything?
No, there will be 3 additional applications on the October meeting, none of which I expect to take too much time.
Okay. Thank you. But I think you're very close to not seeing site plan review permits anymore,
Right.
which will be good for you,
Yeah.
as well as vacation rentals in medium density zones. So there you go. Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else, let's adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan,
Thanks.
have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Wow.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Carmen.